What's going on, guys? Q1 is coming to a close, and I'm here with our head of product, Billy, and we're going to discuss all the cool updates that came out in Q1 this year. So first off, we had a massive sprint. Like, we basically create like a short list of users that we really focus on their experience. What are some of the biggest updates that came from that this quarter?
Some of the biggest ones, I mean, just even given the quick bullet list here is overhaul on cost layers and how you can view and manage a cost layer. And we can even talk about what a cost layer is for those that aren't aware. Another big one was being able to reconcile inbound shipments. And inbound shipments particularly relevant for anyone dealing with Amazon. And so there's a lot of things happening there. And then another one here is dealing with the fulfillment orders, being able to split an order into multiple fulfillments and have multiple shipments on those, and really being able to break down an order and your ability to fulfill on it in many ways. So those are kind of the big ones I'd say that we've got.
So the first off, cost layer. Cost layers, just to explain that real fast. Cost layers comes from this concept from an operator's perspective of landed cost. And it's like baking variable costs like shipping or duties or random stuff into the cost of goods. Luminous just calls it cost layers, where each time you have like a shipment or a PO or basically anytime something's received and you add something to it, it splits off like a layer.
Yeah, each bundle is going to get adding those costs right into the cost of goods. So when it sells, it actually takes on that freight that may have been required to get it to the particular warehouse that fulfills, or what have you. Some systems, and people call them like COGS layers as well, because it's really the foundation for your cost of goods that's going to come out of it.
And it's like so many e-commerce operators, you have the unit cost of a garment. So that's just the cost that's on the PO.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it can double or triple depending on the type of product that you're buying, once you add in duties and freight and other things.
Well, yeah, especially in this climate when you're talking about a 25+% duty in a lot of cases, right? Tariffs and things like that. I mean, the cost is significant. And instead of eating that on your profit and loss as some one-time cost, you want to spread it across the goods that you're actually getting in, and being able to see a clearer picture of what your profitability is on those goods, as opposed to keeping them separated, right? Like those tariffs and costs being separated are going to mess up, your profitability numbers.
So how easy is it in Luminous to, number one, view your cost layers and then also even like edit your cost layers?
Yeah. So yeah, a cost layer is created every time, as we mentioned, every time goods are received at a warehouse. And so you can get a lot of them because you might be transferring, and it's per SKU, but you might be doing a bunch of transfers, a bunch of purchases. Things like this are always happening. So you can end up with a lot of these layers. And as you sell, those layers are essentially depleted, to your cost of goods. And now, because of all this, since there are so many layers, it can be a bit confusing to understand, well, how did I arrive at this cost? And so we have added a couple of key features to give some transparency to that. So now you can actually click on a cost layer and see all the transactions, both that created the layer as well as that kind of depleted the layer. So all of the adjustments, and of course the sales, every time a sale occurs, it's going to register there. So you can actually click and see every sale that was impacted by that cost layer, and then dive into the sale and dig in more. And so really trying to open up the transparency of what these layers are, so that how they got there. You can trust the information that you're dealing with, the numbers that are there. And then if something is off, because obviously no one's perfect, there's a lot of things happen and mistakes are made, and someone types a number wrong. Now we're trying to also make it a little easier to fix those things. So if you know that the cost is a little off, being able to edit that cost at the right permission level and make an adjustment so that it feeds into your cost of goods correctly, right? So that's a big part of it as well now.
Something that I would add, because there's a whole lot of technical jargon in there. Practically speaking, who are these new cost layers for? Well, I would say Luminous services a very special or a very specific type of brand that is multi-warehouse, and they want to keep track of accurate landed costs at different warehouses. So, like, practically speaking, most of our customers, they will purchase raw materials. They'll send them to like a co-manufacturer, or really in a warehouse in Luminous. They'll assemble them. They'll bake in some costs there. Then they'll maybe transfer it to Amazon or transfer it to the 3PL. Luminous can keep track of all those cost layers and all the stuff that you're mentioning, and the stuff that's still on the roadmap is making that experience even better, even easier to upkeep, I would say. But that's sort of like, just think about that. I have FBA, I have a co-manufacturer, I have a warehouse, and how do I keep track of my landed cost across all of those warehouses? It's challenging.
Yep. Well, and when you do have those multiple warehouses, it's going to be often slightly different at each one. I mean, that's the thing. And so, and
Yes.
if you ignore that, in some cases, I mean, you might have products that you're completely like unprofitable on. They're just straight up losses that are hiding in a warehouse that happens to be a little more expensive than the others, and that's where it becomes a really big deal. I mean, if you're a really simple
Right.
operation, I've got my one warehouse, it's in house, and I sell out of it, and everything else. I mean, it can be relatively simple to kind of track of what those landed costs are. But the instant you start moving things around, and coming in with multiple shipments across different things, and yeah, it gets complicated real quick. So that's definitely the intent.
Yeah,
It
it's
makes
like
that a lot easier.
that's the difference between like I've seen Settles IMS, for example. Like if it's just a basic Shopify brand that buys finished goods and you want to bake in shipping costs and it's just going to one warehouse. Like, yeah, use like Settles IMS or use a really basic one. We're really building towards that more complicated, like baking up landed costs into multiple warehouses, and like you actually want to do that.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it becomes a big deal. And I mean, this is just the foundation of it in a lot of ways, right? Like now we have the transparency, the
Yep.
ability to edit. It's going to get smarter. It's going to get easier, more automatic. But a big piece is being able to reveal what's behind it. So
Right.
when that automatic thing happens, you're not just like, can I trust this or not? That's obviously a big challenge with all the really smart stuff that occurs. It's like, okay, do I really believe that this what actually happened here? Yeah, exactly. Why is this? That's how given that insight in advance. So next, talking about inbound shipments and transfers and how inbound shipments work. This really applies most heavily probably to any Amazon sellers. Companies that are selling on Amazon, because you generally create an inbound shipment on Amazon, and then you need to actually ship it to them. So you end up doing this advanced shipping notice. Some other warehouses will do it as well through that advanced shipping notice concept, but an inbound is really on the receiving end, like they are saying this is what we were expecting.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we've had in the system to be able to show any warehouses that have an inbound shipment that they're anticipating or expecting, and now you need to go and ship that product to them. And so you can reconcile these inbound shipping notices to transfers or POs or inbound shipments, or shipments that you already have on their way, whether it be from a vendor or from a transfer. Be able to reconcile that so that when it does show up and the warehouse is saying, yes, we did receive the goods, it automatically generates that cross layer again, getting back to that, and automatically does that.
And this also goes back to that same point about like who's Luminous for. Well,
Mhm.
a lot of this update was around I have multiple warehouses. There's multiple paths of like replenishment. So like
Mhm.
I can purchase some goods from my Chinese manufacturer and send them direct, create a inbound shipment that's going straight to Amazon. Or I can purchase some goods from my Taiwan manufacturer and send them straight to my 3PL. Before we didn't really have a concept. We didn't break down incoming by warehouse.
Yep.
Like we would just have this general incoming number, like you have 1,000 incoming, and it's like, well, I have FBA, I have my 3PL, and I have my East Coast 3PL. That's like, well, where is it actually going in
Yeah.
incoming to? So that was another piece. Practically, it was like, okay, now you have the ability to create all those different. I could purchase a bunch of finished goods, split off half of them, go to FBA, split off half of them, go into my 3PL,
Hmm.
and we can correctly show you that. Like you have half incoming here, half incoming here, and we can reconcile the inbound shipment in the external system, FBA, with the one in your internal system,
Hmm.
Luminous. I don't know if that made sense.
Makes sense to me, at least.
Like we just get so deep into jargon.
Yeah, that is the challenge for sure. I mean, that's what's interesting there is, even when we first introduced incoming, to a location, it was just whatever location was on the PO. So
Right.
you have put a location on the PO, I'm going to, ship it to this warehouse. But frequently, especially if you do larger POs, you might be splitting that 5 ways. It's going to go to multiple warehouses inbound. And that's the big thing here is that we want to show that accurately and then make it easy. So when it does show up, it's like kind of automatically reconciled. If that's being shown or tracked through this inbound shipment, like through Amazon or through your 3PL, if they're marking things as received, now you don't have to in Luminous go mark it as received. It's going to automatically mark it as such as they do in the warehouse. And that shrinks the steps there, simplifies that whole process.
The last thing I would say is it's rare to have a system out of the box where you can have the concept of a shipment from the brand's perspective and then from the 3PL or Amazon's perspective, and then reconcile those together.
Absolutely.
We're actually one of the only systems out of the box that is built to do that, which is like such a common thing for modern brands. They buy stuff, they send it to either a 3PL or FBA,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it never gets reconciled.
Yeah.
Or the reconciliation happens on a Google Sheet.
Yep. Yep. No, that's a huge deal. I mean, that's something I haven't seen, without some sort of major customization or, some sort of app built in or whatever it is that they're doing, being able to see those advanced shipping notices, then, make that happen. So that's a big deal. And that'll continue, as everything else will continue to get even better as we start to automate some of those steps as well.
Last question. So if I create an inbound shipment in Amazon, it will auto draft actually explain to me, say I'm a brand. Yeah, I create an inbound shipment in Amazon, and let's say my 3PL is the one who packs, ships it, and sends it to FBA. What happens in Luminous?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is anybody that deals with Amazon is familiar with that process of creating an inbound in order to get their goods to Amazon. And then Amazon has a bunch of labels and other stuff. They've created these shipments. So now in Luminous, when you match that inbound, so it'll come in, we're going to see that in Luminous, and you can now match that or create a transfer for it from your 3PL. And that will actually create a transfer sales order, essentially. It's a transfer order that will be pushed to your 3PL so that they can actually fulfill on it without you having to go redo all the work you did in Amazon.
What normally happens for brands who have a 3PL that sends their stuff to Amazon? What normally happens? Is it just all manual normally?
Yeah. You basically have to go recreate the inbound shipment you just did in Amazon. You got to go recreate it in your 3PL. You got to do all the same work to create this order with all the items, because now you actually have to ship it out of there to match what they're expecting the inbound to be. There are still steps that, still have to create it in Amazon, but now we're going to push all those details as much as we can, less at the moment, some of the labeling, because just due to how communication with Amazon works. So there is still a step of just needing to forward the labels and stuff over to your 3PL, but otherwise creating a shipment or a sales order essentially for the 3PL, for the warehouse to fulfill on. And it will have a name too that matches. I mean, that's the nice thing. It'll have a number that matches the inbound, so you can actually reconcile those pieces. They can pick and pack it. You don't have to recreate it there. And you just send them the labels to make sure they get slapped on and shipped out.
Man, one of the themes that keeps popping up is Luminous, like one of our superpowers truly is, we're building towards multi-warehouse flows. And there's so many systems that work built with that in mind. As we move on to the next one, fulfillment orders, even more so, like this concept of multi-warehouse. So explain, why did we add the concept of a fulfillment order? Didn't it used to be called shipment and Luminous?
Yeah, we call them, well, and they kind of half existed behind the scenes. Let's say but every sales order, typically, and even in other systems, we can start even there. It's like you have a sales order that you then push to like your warehouse for them to fulfill on it. But there are a lot of scenarios. I mean, especially multi-warehouse scenarios, B2B, kind of like wholesale sales, things like this, where maybe the order is really big and you're only, partially able to fulfill on it, but they're big enough that you're not like going to cancel it because of that. And they, there's communication there and stuff. So there's different needs to fulfill on these in a more, call it a creative way. I mean, just depending on what is required. So now, a sales order, I mean, that is what comes from the sales channel. You have a sales order. And as opposed to like just passing that along, we create a fulfillment order to match. So in your simplest sense, it's going to reflect almost exactly what your sales order was. If some customer buys one item, you're going to create a fulfillment order, or the system will create a fulfillment order with one item and then push that along to the warehouse to actually be fulfilled.
And I feel like where this... Oh, sorry. You finish. I was interrupted.
Yeah. I mean, that's the essence of it. From there, the reason we did it, of course, was to then allow for to split those things up instead of having to split up a sales order that now no longer matches the original sales order. Like the sales order actually stays the same. And other systems, that's generally what they end up doing is they're taking a sales order, splitting it into pieces, but now you don't have a complete record. It's like you just topped up the sale. We're actually looking at that like, no, that sale is still whole.
It's still the same.
It's the same thing, but we're going to add maybe it's 5 different fulfillment orders.
And then invoicing against that should be you invoice against the different shipments or excuse me, fulfillment orders or like the total.
Correct. Yes. So that's the other piece is then we can invoice against the fulfillments. So if you're only able to ship out a third of the product and the other 2/3 might take 2 months and you want to invoice them, yes,
Very cool.
we can actually invoice on the 1/3.
Well, I know what because we were doing that. We were doing some weird, weird shit behind the scenes where like that's how we would handle the dropship EDI flows is like I can't remember how we had set it up, but we were essentially doing that, but there was no UI for it.
Yeah.
So like now you actually have an option to do that.
Yeah. Well, and we did have an option to be able to invoice on a shipment.
Okay.
But what's interesting with this is if it was a big order, you might ship it with 10 boxes. I mean, like on the same day. So it's like, and so the challenge was if we invoiced per shipment, you would get 10 invoices. So and we ship them all the same day. There's 10 boxes.
Yeah.
It'd come back as 10 shipments. And you'd get 10 invoices, 1 invoice per shipment. So obviously you don't need 10 invoices for the same day.
Yeah.
So now we have a fulfillment order. It still might take 10 boxes, but we can do 1 invoice on the entire fulfillment order as opposed to, which is still only part of the bigger sales order, right? As opposed to every individual shipment underneath, which is how it kind of had worked for a time there. So now it allows you that flexibility of like, if I want to invoice in little chunks or bigger chunks or, different ways that you can actually, if you're going to do that invoicing, and then also just pushing those updates, now we can push, it's going to say like when the fulfillment order actually goes, and this is the other layer, there's still shipments. So one fulfillment order might have 10 shipments on it.
Yep.
So it's still another layer of splitting, if you will, essentially, but it's being able to have all those individual shipments will show in that fulfillment order, but we can now more easily kind of push that fulfillment order around or break it down further, if it needs to go to a different warehouse, if it needs to be held, if it needs lots of different things that way, but still have that flexibility to ship it in multiple pieces.
And then it opens up the automation capabilities, which are practically speaking, here's how some of our customers are going to be using it. Let's say you have 2 separate warehouses for fulfillment. For one of our customers, they ship bulbs and flowers out of 2 separate warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
Now those orders come in together, like you sell them on the same website. So, and a lot of times they push them to buy them together. But practically speaking, fulfillment, and the main use case, if I could summarize it, it's like you can this concept even exists for like, let's say you have like 2 separate picking lines, or like you have a temperature controlled part of the warehouse versus that. It's totally separate.
Yeah.
So we can do the conditional logic to auto split an order and push it to different systems.
Yeah.
Like that could be, so for example, somebody could order this and this, which are fulfilled out of 2 separate warehouses. It could be 2 separate 3PLs.
Mm-hmm.
It could be like one is a drop shipper and then one is your own warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, we can set in logic to split, send to, we call it a destination OMS.
Yeah.
But we can send this to ShipStation, and then we can send this to the WMS of your 3PL for them to fill it. So that automation is it's so key for these multi-warehouse fulfillment.
Yep. Well, and you even hinted at the pick list side too. So it's like, I mean, not only is it invoicing and things like that, but now, yes, let's create 2 split pick lists, but I don't want all of the items for the second warehouse on the pick list because obviously they're not even here. I want only this chunk of items. So that fulfillment order, I can create a pick list off of that to be able to fulfill it and not just have this list for the entire order. So, I mean, there's definitely some big capabilities, and that's the initial automated portion is let's automatically split according to where the goods actually are, where is our product, these separate spots or warehouses or locations, and then they can look at it like a single order. They actually don't even need to worry about the other fulfillment order. Right, guys, they don't need to think like, oh, I only need to do part of this. Like, no, they have an order in front of them. It's just their fulfillment order. It's not the other one. It's not the other half. It's not the whole sales order.
And is it easy to check the status as somebody who's going in? Say they're just like, I just want to see the sales order.
Yep.
What's the fulfillment status of this item and this item? Is it easy to see in Luminous?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually now show a every order has several numbers on it. So it'll say the quantity ordered for every line, right? Here's the quantity you ordered. Here's the quantity that has been submitted on fulfillment orders. And then here's the quantity that's been shipped. And here's the quantity that's been paid. I mean, so essentially you have these multiple.
Yeah.
So you can always see this is what was ordered, but then I can actually very quickly tell, hey, these three haven't been sent on fulfillments yet. Or, maybe they all have, and we've only shipped half of them. I can actually see that very quickly. And so you end up getting all that information kind of summarized. So you can look at any individual fulfillment and see its status, like what are the items on it? Have they been shipped yet? What's happening there? I can then look at the sales order and see overall, it's going to have a general status of like partially fulfilled, partially shipped, that sort of thing. But the detail is all going to be there of what has been put on fulfillments, what has been shipped out already, everything else. It's going to just roll up right there in your line items, your sales order.
The more we talk about this, the more jazzed I am, because at the beginning of this sprint, what we communicated was like, okay, there's this segment that we're really focusing on. It's really these modern multi-warehouse operators, and everything we've pushed is for that operator. Like, it's either shipments at the top of the supply chain or shipments or fulfillment orders at the bottom of the supply chain. And that's the direction we're going. Like, we're making those things easier for a multi-warehouse operator to make those decisions and make the changes in the other systems when necessary.
Yep.
It's really cool to see, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. I mean, and this is just I feel like a lot of this work is that foundational work that's just going to get more and more interesting as we layer on the smart tech on top of it all. So it's going to get more fun.
Okay. Last part, Q2. Now we're transitioning to what's not done. So
yeah, I mean, a big push is definitely going to be the starting to automate a lot of these steps and layers, and some of that, in a basic sense and like the most typical sense will exist, right away. But there's definitely a lot of pieces there where we want to get a lot smarter about that, so that it kind of happens automatically. Then having a rules system, that we have a basic one now, being able to expand on that's going to be a big piece of it. And I mean, we've got several areas that are kind of like that we're going to start to pursue more heavily. And I mean, some of it's going to be, we're playing it. I mean, especially with our sprint, like our goal here is to really work with these key customers and really start to fulfill on that. And so some things are staying very nimble. I'll say that even as well. So meaning like it can change, as we kind of like every step we take, we kind of reanalyze what's going to be the most value. But that's a big portion of it, I think, is going to be automating some of those things, getting smarter about it so that it just becomes that much easier for the operator to actually function in these areas. But we will have a big thing with even some of the purchasing, how that gets spread out, across multiple shipments and multiple POs. And I mean, there's some really cool things that'll happen with your purchasing flows that is right around the corner as well for Q2. And I mean, there's just too much to to really get crazy about, but to talk about really specifically. But I'm excited to see where we go with it.
cool. Well, that's basically it. We'll see you guys next month for some of the newer updates. Peace.